Everyone, my name is Oscar Gittemeyer. I'm with the San Diego Public Library, and I have Susan Moore here with the San Diego County Library, and we're going to be facilitating the COVID vaccines fact and fiction program for you tonight. This is a collaboration with the Serra Cooperative Library System, so this is a program for all 14 library systems throughout Southern California. So thank you for joining us tonight and for bringing your questions to us. I'm going to introduce and do some bios on our three panelists this evening. First off, we have Dr. Klein. Dr. Klein is the Chief Medical Officer for Cigna's Southern California and Nevada markets. In this role, he is responsible for the medical leadership and the clinical guidance for the market, with focus on provider partnerships and improving patient care. With 13 years of clinical practice as a board-certified family physician and over 16 years as a physician executive, Dr. Klein drives collaboration and partnerships with physician groups and hospital systems to deliver high quality care to Cigna customers. Dr. Klein is adept at communicating with clinicians and non-clinicians alike. He is an innovative leader working to improve healthcare outcomes through data analysis, population health, and cutting-edge methods of care delivery. Dr. Klein received his BS in psychobiology from UCLA, his medical degree from the University of California, San Diego School of Medicine, and completed a family medicine residency at Kaiser Permanente, where he served as chief resident. Dr. Klein is board certified in family medicine and an assistant clinical professor of family medicine at the UCLA Geffen School of Medicine. So, Dr. Klein, thank you for joining us. We also have Dr. Doe. Dr. Doe is currently the Chief Pharmacy Officer at San Diego County Health and Human Services Agency. Her responsibilities include coordinating a matrix of organizations to provide healthcare services to a diverse population consisting of 3.3 million residents from different societal, cultural, and ethnic backgrounds, monitoring, identifying emerging trends in healthcare and pharmaceutical services, to strategize, plan, and implement new programs. She has been a pharmacist for more than 15 years and worked in various healthcare settings. So thank you, Dr. Doe, for joining us. And Dr. Kalik, since 2003, Kalik has served as the Chief Medical Officer of the Indian Health Council, a consortium of 9 tribes located in North County, San Diego. IHC provides on-site and outreach services and programs to nearly 5,000 clients and provides over 20,000 visits per year. He received his medical degree from Harvard Medical School and did both internship and residency in internal medicine and pediatrics at the Combined Internal Medicine Pediatrics Residency Program at University of Southern California, Los Angeles County. Cal also serves his community by contracting part-time with the Elizabeth Hospice, providing hospice care and emotional support to both the terminally ill and their family members. He serves on the advisory board of directors for California State University, San Marcos, and the governance board member of the local All Tribes Charter School located on the Rincon Indian Reservation. And thank you all so much to our 3 panelists. And we are going to get things started off with Dr. Klein.
All right, well, thank you, Oscar. In addition to my role at Cigna and being a board certified family physician, I'm also a father, brother, and like you have just had the longest, strangest year and a half of my life. Early in the pandemic, it seemed like the hard part to ending this might be developing a vaccine. That part basically worked out. We developed and manufactured several vaccines in record time. But it turns out there's another hard part. Tens of millions of people in the United States who could not be vaccinated, who could be vaccinated, are not vaccinated, perhaps in part because we developed that vaccine in record time, leading some to question the safety of these vaccines. And these people in particular are vulnerable to the Delta variant. So you want some facts, that's why you came here, right? Well, here are some quick ones. Number 1, if you're unvaccinated and get infected with SARS-CoV-2, that's the virus that causes COVID-19, it affects your entire body. Heart, lungs, brain, kidneys, essentially nose to toes, and stays there for at least a week. And it's much more likely to cause you long-term problems than the vaccine. 2, if you get the vaccine, it primes your immune system so that your body can fight the virus. But then the vaccine's gone. It will not be with you anymore. 3, a full 96% of practicing doctors in the United States have gotten vaccinated. They're the ones in the trenches, seeing patients day in and day out. They know what's up. 4, the Delta variant surge we're seeing right now is almost entirely being driven by unvaccinated individuals, where unvaccinated people are 29 times more likely to be hospitalized with COVID-19 than those who are fully vaccinated. And 5, the vaccines work beyond a shadow of a doubt. Even with the Delta variant, over 99% of all deaths from COVID in the United States are in unvaccinated or partially vaccinated people. If people get vaccinated, we're going to save thousands and thousands of lives here in San Diego and everywhere who would otherwise be killed by COVID and decrease the likelihood of more variants. The more we vaccinate, the faster we can quash this surge and get back to normal, and the less likely we'll have more variants or surges and force us to do a shutdown again. As you'll hear from Dr. Doe, these types of vaccines are not new. The speed to market was primarily the result of a worldwide effort, the scientific community and pharmaceutical companies and regulators getting together. The scientific process was as rigorous as always. An example you see on this slide is Operation Warp Speed. No steps were skipped, and there was oversight from the FDA and the CDC with public review of data and an ability to provide input and comments, just like normal. So how was the process done so quickly? Well, there are 2 very important reasons. One was the use of a provision that allows for emergency use authorization. This is something by the FDA that allows for treatments and medical countermeasures, such as monoclonal antibodies or vaccines, during a public health emergency. That helps cut through red tape. And 2 was Operation Warp Speed. This was a program that was supported by the Trump administration and Congress and funded with over $10 billion. This helped support industry so that manufacturing could happen at the same time vaccines were being tested. Another question we hear about is, who were the volunteers in the test groups? Trial diversity, right? Well, our scientists wanted this to be tested in a variety of people, a group that essentially looked like America. And we saw between 10 and 13% of the subjects were Black, 15 to 26% Latinx, 4 to 6% Asian, and even about 1% were Native American. Next slide. So how do these vaccines work? Well, vaccines train our immune system to fight disease, just as would happen when you were exposed to the disease itself. But crucially, vaccines work without making us sick. This is done by stimulating development of antibodies, but also T cells and B cells, called memory cells. All the vaccines work to prime your body to develop an immune response to an important part of the virus, in this case, the spike protein. Those are the little spikes you see sticking out of the coronavirus in pictures online and on TV. Your body learns to recognize the spike protein, and the memory cells then remember these foreign invaders after this first encounter. Then they stand at the ready the next time the invader enters your body. But it happens a little bit different in each vaccine. The most basic way is how the Novavax vaccine works. Now, this is a vaccine that's still in clinical trials. It uses a little piece of the spike protein itself in the vaccine. Now, it's injected into your body. Your body recognizes this spike protein as foreign. Your body stimulated to produce antibodies and memory cells. Now, this works like the hepatitis B or pertussis vaccine. Now, the J&J vaccine works a little different. It puts a little piece of DNA. Now, DNA is the gene that codes for the spike protein. It puts that into a disabled, harmless cold virus called adenovirus. That acts like a Trojan horse to get the DNA into your body. Then your body translates that DNA into something called messenger RNA. That's the mRNA you hear about, right? That's simply a temporary set of instructions, essentially blueprints that instructs your body cells to make the spike protein. Your body recognizes that spike protein again as foreign and develops an immune response. This is how the Ebola vaccine works. Pfizer and Moderna almost work exactly the same way, but they synthesize the mRNA in the lab, so it skips having to use the adenovirus. That mRNA is the key part of the vaccine, and when injected in your body, basically just instructs your body's cells to make copies of the spike protein. And like the others, you develop that immune response to the spike protein. What's really important to know is in none of these vaccines do we use live or dead virus. And at no time does any of the vaccine material get into the nucleus of your cells where DNA resides. So it can't cause any DNA mutations or any problems with your fertility. And these vaccines do not contain any aborted fetal cells at all. And because there's only a single spike protein and no complete virus in your body, a recently vaccinated person can't shed virus and infect anyone. So I hope this helps you understand a bit more about how the vaccines came to market and how they work in your body. Now I'll hand this off to Dr. Doe to talk about some more myths that you might hear. We've got some information as well on where you can get additional information from the CDC, the World Health Organization. Cigna's got resources as well. And then on the right side, you also see where to go get your vaccines. And I know we've got some questions even about that. These are the same places you would go to get boosters as well. Dr. Doe?
Thank you, Dr. Klein. So what I have is I know the topic of tonight was myths and facts. So I have some prepared information that I will share, but I would also like to invite our fellow panelists, Dr. Klein and Dr. Kellogg. If you have other information you'd like to share or add it, please feel free to chime in. Oscar, do you have the slide, or this is what we have?
Oh, yes, this is the first slide that we had up for the vaccine myths and vaccine facts.
Got it. Thank you. So, so the first myth that I wanted to touch on is the myth that the COVID-19 vaccine can affect women's fertility. So this is a really important question, and we wanted to make sure we address your concern. So the fact is the vaccine does not affect fertility. So Dr. Klein just explained that the vaccine encourages the body's immune system to fight the virus by specifically targeting the protein found on the virus surface. So this is not the same protein that's involved during pregnancy. And however, the disease itself can seriously impact pregnancy and overall health. In general, for pregnancy, we want to encourage you to talk to your healthcare providers before you make a decision, and they will be in the best position to address any of your concerns or questions before you make that decision with your healthcare provider. And then the second myth that I have also seen asked a lot is, I am getting myocarditis or pericarditis with the vaccine. So these are the inflammation of the heart. So, millions of doses of vaccine have been given and the risk is quite low. So if you want to look at the risk, the vaccine risk is about 0.001%. We have millions of cases of myocarditis that were diagnosed every year, and that's unrelated to COVID vaccine. So even though it's a rare side effect, it can happen. So, but most of the time, 80% have recovered and have been discharged from this side effect. The third myth is Sorry, a little technical difficulty. Okay, so the third myth is it's not worth getting the COVID vaccine since you might still get COVID-19. So the benefit of the vaccine outweigh the risk of the infection. So vaccination provides a strong boost in your immunity in order for you to protect you from infection and severe illnesses due to COVID-19. So the vaccine, the disease without vaccination may lead to other long-term side effects, especially in children and also in those with, in a lot of adults today, they have something called long hauler. So they experience the side effects for a long time from COVID. And then the next one is, it's too late to get the second dose of the COVID vaccine. So it's the recommended duration or the interval between the two doses of the Pfizer vaccine is 3 weeks. It's 4 weeks for Moderna. If you get the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, it is one dose, so you don't have to worry about the second dose, but it's important that you get the second dose as soon as possible. Even if you miss that time interval, you are encouraged to get the second dose as soon as possible. The next myth that we have seen is the COVID-19 vaccine won't work against COVID-19 variants. So the current data that we have suggests that the current vaccine that are authorized or approved in the US protect against most variants currently, including the Delta variant. So the vaccine itself provides protection against severe COVID-19, include deaths and hospitalization. So with the Delta variant, we have seen a decline in protection. Initially, we saw about 90% protection across the Pfizer and the Moderna, and about 70% with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. So that's just the protection against getting sick from the virus, but they are still very effective against the most important thing that we're trying to prevent is death and hospitalization. Essentially, with Delta variant, the vaccine's efficacy has been reduced, but also you still get the great protection of not getting really sick to the point where you have to go to the hospital. And most people who are vaccinated don't die from the infection itself. So I think that's important to highlight. Again, the side effects from COVID vaccines are too dangerous. So possibly, there are side effects from COVID vaccine, just like any vaccines that we experience. For example, if you get a flu vaccine, you might get muscle ache for a day or two. That's usually a sign that your body is actually working and it's actually making antibodies in response to the instructions that you're getting from the vaccine. So you might get that temporary discomfort for a day or two, and that usually goes away. But that's still a lot better than getting sick from COVID vaccine, being hospitalized, and also experiencing the side effects or the long-term side effects of COVID, known as the long hauler. And also there is a question or the myth that the COVID vaccine's unknown long-term effects are too much of a risk. So even though we don't know everything there is to know about COVID and the vaccine itself because it's too new, but the current data that we have, including the technologies that is used in the vaccine, the technology in the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine has been around for a long time, and it has been tested in a lot of vaccine. The technology in the Johnson & Johnson vaccine has also been used in many vaccines, and those have been shown to be safe and effective. So we are continuing to monitor for the safety and efficacy of the vaccine. Also, some have concern about money, where I don't have the money to pay for the vaccine. So currently the vaccine is completely free to everyone in the United States. So you can get this vaccine if you're 12 and older, you can get the vaccine at no cost because the vaccines are approved or authorized for individuals 12 and older. The FDA is reviewing data from the drug manufacturer for additional information on younger patients or younger population, and that information should be forthcoming in the next few weeks or so. So you don't have to pay out of pocket for the COVID vaccine, not before, during, or after your appointment. You don't have to go on the internet to try to get a vaccine. Dr. Klein shared a slide with some information on how to get the vaccine, and hopefully you have heard of myturn.ca.gov, where you can actually get an appointment for your vaccine. So as a pharmacist, I'm also very proud to be part of a community where we vaccinate, the pharmacy community vaccinated almost 50% of the vaccine doses in San Diego County. So I would say you can always go to a pharmacy, and there's literally a pharmacy at every corner. So go get your vaccine from the pharmacy, from your physician's office, from your medical provider, from there are a lot of community resources to help you find vaccine, and you don't have to pay for them, and you can get it at your convenience. A lot of pharmacies I know are open 24/7, or they're open until 9 p.m. at least, so you can get that in the pharmacy as well. Let's see. So if lots of people get the vaccine, I won't need it. So this is a really great question. So the fact is, everyone is able to get a vaccine. Whoever is able to get a vaccine should get vaccinated to protect yourself and the community. So we know that a lot of the individuals who are immunocompromised don't have the same response as healthy individuals. So even if they're vaccinated, they might not be fully protected. You also want to get vaccinated to protect yourself, because based on what I just said earlier, we don't have the vaccine approved or authorized for everybody. So everyone who is less than 12 years of age is not eligible to receive a vaccine right now. So that's a large part of the population that's still unprotected. So when we have a lot of people who, the vaccine can replicate and transfer, there's a chance for the vaccine to mutate, and that's just typical with the vaccine, and which is what you see with the variant. So the more people that are unvaccinated, the more chances the virus can transfer between person to person, and then it mutate, and then it becomes more difficult for us to fight the virus. So if you're eligible, we encourage you to get the vaccine as soon as possible. And if I have already had COVID, I don't need the vaccine. So the current thinking and the recommendation right now is for everyone to get a vaccine, even if you had COVID-19. So we don't know how long the immunity, the natural immunity, which is what you get when you have an infection, we don't know how long that lasts. You know, we have found with the vaccine that it doesn't last forever. In some people, it does decline over time, and therefore the protection declines. So you might have heard about the booster and the third dose. So that's the reason why we encourage, if you are recovering from COVID-19, typically you want to wait for about 90 days to go get the vaccine. But as soon as you are eligible, please go and get the vaccine, because the vaccine will provide you with an added protection when you are even if you have recovered from COVID vaccine. So I think that's the end of the prepared material, but I do want to touch a little bit on the booster and the third dose. So the third dose is for individuals who are immunocompromised. So you got 2 doses and somehow your body is not responding strong enough to make that immunity for you to protect yourself against COVID. So you get a third dose. The booster are for certain population who has completed the vaccine. So if you are immunocompromised, typically right now we're looking at maybe 3 doses to give you almost the same response as a healthy individual with 2 doses. And then the booster is pretty much in about 6 months or so with the Pfizer vaccine. We might see a decline in the response because the body, you know, for example, if you go to the gym and the first week you might be lifting 20 pounds, you know, next week you lift 40 pounds. And then if you stop exercising for a while, you might go back to 20 pounds. You don't start up with 40 pounds again the next time you go to the gym. So that's how I visualize the booster, and hopefully that helps. And then if you have questions about booster and third doses, I'm sure we have other excellent panelists who can also explain that as well. And we have some information on how to get vaccine, but I'm sure we all have that information. So please feel free to let us know if you have questions. I will turn over to Dr. Kalak.
That's great. Thank you so much, Dr. Doe, Dr. Klein. I have the easy job of actually just giving some very relatable examples. And so Dr. Klein and Dr. Doe did a fantastic job on the components of vaccine development, the important components of the need to become vaccinated. And so I'm here just to kind of give some real world examples. And so in my public health mission, serving the American Indian tribes out in North County, we see a lot of individuals who are, very interested in some of those same questions that we've addressed today. So I would give some real world examples about vaccines and why people think they had developed too quickly. So if people are in a home and the administration of the United States really threw a lot of resources at this vaccine development, and so instead of having just one factory, there was tens, maybe 20 factories looking at it. There were many, not only 100 individuals, the researchers looking at the vaccine. We're talking thousands, possibly tens of thousands of individuals working on the vaccine. So obviously, with many hands on the problem, the vaccine and some of the issues that had to be worked through in terms of a normal work process for a vaccine were developed much faster. And now, that said, the technologies that we're using today were already in place for almost 4 decades. I have a colleague that I went to school with who's actually working on a vaccine for HIV, and so he's been actually utilizing the technology for HIV. Now, the difference between HIV and COVID is that we have treatments for HIV. We have treatments for COVID as well, but it's a much quicker disease process than HIV. And so the take-home point from this slide is that when you have so many more resources, as Dr. Klein mentioned in the warp speed example, is that you actually have this vaccine develop much more quickly. But the important caveat to that is that corners were not cut. This technology has been in place for quite some time, and it was just utilized and plugged in a process that allowed it to be moved much more faster than it had done if you had a other vaccine that didn't quite have such a dramatic impact on the population of the US. Moving to the next slide is the fact that thankfully COVID vaccine is usually mild in healthy people. Now, I can ask often for a show of hands about any people who actually have had the flu, and many people have actually had the flu, but many people have actually had like a real flu case where you've been dramatically ill. And it's a sad note that in a quote unquote typical year, we lose about 40 to 50,000 people a year to flu, the normal influenza that occurs in the winter months. Right now, we're in the middle of our influenza season. So in a more real perspective, I mean, that's like a football stadium, right? So that's like Jack Murphy, or actually used to be called Jack Murphy. Now it's Qualcomm. Used to be Qualcomm. Now it's just a new stadium. But I mean, that holds about 50,000, 60,000 people. So if you could imagine that, and the unfortunate individuals who had flu and actually had passed away because of that infection, you can kind of get a grasp about the quote unquote COVID infection in the usual healthy population. And that's the important to prevent those types of disease processes and save those lives. Another good example is the historical example of Dr. Shantusham. So Dr. Shantusham was a immunologist, a physician who actually did some seminal work on vaccines for Haemophilus influenza B, the pneumococcal vaccines. These are vaccines that we provide 2, 4, and 6 months old children every day. And so there was some work done locally and also in American Indian tribes. And it's estimated that over the past 6 years, with the addition of these vaccines between 2014 and 2020, that over 7 million lives were saved, 7 million people, saved because of these vaccines. So even though, thankfully, the COVID illness is fairly mild at most, nonetheless, it touched many people where they weren't as fortunate. The football stadium, as we had mentioned previously, and actually individuals who have lost their lives thus far due to COVID. So we did talk a little bit about the FDA evaluation, going to the next slide, regarding it being rushed. And Dr. Klein did a great job and actually provided a good graphic. And I would refer anyone to the CDC, and you can type in the search box Operation Warp Speed, and there's a great infographic about how that process was borne out, the tens of thousands of individuals, and the process by which not only the vaccine was developed, but also the laboratories involved, the personnel and researchers that were involved, but also the dispersion and transportation of the vaccine and materials, the mechanical and structural engineers, needing to form these boxes and transport devices that needed to get the vaccine out. So this was all hands on deck in order to save as many lives as possible in the shortest amount of time. And then I would refer again you to the Operation Warp Speed and the CDC website for more information, and a great infographic on that for review. I think the last second to the last slide, trials are too short to detect long-term effects. Now, this is a good one because you kind of have us there. I mean, this, of course, we've only gone through 19 to almost 20 months of this pandemic, thankfully, right? It's pandemic in 1918, pandemic here in 2020. We don't have to go through this like every year, every 5 years, every 10 years. And so, truthfully, things are still being worked out. But because of the way the problem was approached, the ability to throw resources at it, and to really look at the vaccine effects, and the way it was brought through phase 1, 2, and 3 trials, there was a process that was not skipped over. There was a distinct ethical procedural process that scientists and researchers use in order to vet the vaccine so it's safe for everyone to get. Now, are there side effects from vaccines? Yes, there are some side effects, but it's usually your own body's immune response in the exposure to the vaccine that you typically feel. Fever, muscle ache, some fluid-like type of sensations. But again, much better than anyone who, and I'm looking for the show of hands, who actually has ever had the flu, a true influenza illness, where you're laid out for almost 3 to 5 days, being severely ill. So this is a good example when we're comparing the side effects that we typically see versus the side effects dramatic side effects we see from flu and or COVID. The last slide is the most important slide, I feel. So resources. So we are your resources. So when I go to Home Depot to buy a skill saw, I just don't pick one that's off the shelf. I ask around. I ask the people that are working there. They usually have a great experience in hardware. They know and they can advise me appropriately. We're here to advise you. We're here to advise you appropriately because we've spent the last 2 to 3 decades practicing medicine and providing care to our patients. And so if there's a question you need to have answered, turn to the experts, which is myself, Dr. Doe, Dr. Klein, your primary care doctor, but please make an informed choice. And so those informed choices do not, unfortunately, include social media. They do not include a Google search. They do not include any type of a string of social media comments on that. You want to ask experts because this is your life and your children and your grandparents that you're making the decisions on. And we will give you the informed answers. And thankfully, you've had Dr. Klein, Dr. Doe, myself, giving you some straight facts on the importance of this choice and where you can go to get those resources. So CDC is a great place to kind of start. And it's cdc.gov. It's really easy to do, and you can get all the information you need from there. But if there's more information and questions you need to ask, then you turn to individuals like myself, Dr. Doe, and Dr. Klein for further information. I want to make sure this next slide, this is information from the San Diego County website, and the graphic is there for review. I strongly encourage, as a local source, to look at San Diego County for any information that you may or may not need. Thank you very much.
All right, and so we are going to open it up to questions and answers now. So we had about 5 questions that came in before the program. And then Susan, if you can also read the questions from our Q&A box as well. And while Susan is prepping those questions, I just want to also add your public library is available here to help you access accurate, reliable information. So again, I'm with the San Diego Public Library, and Susan here is joining us from the San Diego County Library. But we have 14 library systems throughout Southern California that are part of the Serra Library Cooperative that are here to help the public. So please use us as a resource as well. And I will kick it over to Susan to read our Q&A questions. And attendees, if you have questions, if you'll please add them to the Q&A box for us. It's the chat box at the bottom of your screen. If you move your mouse, you'll see like a little pop-up window and it says Q&A. If you'll please add your questions in there, we will read them to the panel. Thank you so much. I will kick it over to Susan.
Okay. Panelists, can you please explain herd immunity and how it applies to the pandemic?
Anybody want to take a shot at this one?
Yeah, we can all do a tag team. And
Right.
So the and herd immunity, that's a great question, actually. And it's very commonly asked on a couple different levels. And so I as a practicing pediatrician, I've been encountering many more clients who are asking questions about vaccines in general, and maybe deferring vaccines, or maybe doing an alternative schedule for vaccines. And it's important that, again, they have the appropriate facts. Now, the vaccines that are dosed are provided at exact times to provide the maximum amount of protection for a particular disease that we're vaccinating against. Now, the many of us who are seeing children or in their 20s and 30s, parents in 20s and 30s, don't really recall or remember disease processes like chickenpox or smallpox, or even meningitis from Haemophilus B, or even ear infections are becoming less and less common in primary care doctors' offices because of the vaccines we provide. And even in my short term as a 20-year-old, not 20-year-old, but as practicing for 20 years as a physician, as a pediatrician, I'm not seeing as many ear vaccinations or ear infections because of the pneumococcal vaccine. Now, when people are vaccinated, there is such a thing called herd immunity. So I'm pretty confident that that number is about 70% of the population needs to be vaccinated to prevent the illness from, and I'm again using general terms for the layperson, to have a penetrance or to penetrate the population and to have a larger outbreak in a community. So with people around you who are vaccinated, they kind of form a protective layer around you, so you don't get the disease. And so many people are like, well, maybe I can just have that protective layer around me. I don't have to get vaccinated. But you have to recall that there's more than just one person or you involved in that population. There are people who cannot mount an immune response, who have very serious illnesses, and anyone over 65, which is not me, actually has a less of immune response, and that is almost 20%, if not 30% of the population that you would be protecting. So it's not only yourself enjoying the herd immunity, it's the individuals who are most at risk enjoying that herd immunity.
That's a great explanation, Dr. Kalak. So that's kind of the number that I use too, is usually about 70% or so for the most infectious diseases that we see. And right now we're at about 56% in the United States. And that's what we were thinking it would be with the Alpha variant we were seeing of COVID. When we got, and that's because what we call the R naught, or the amount of people that get infected for every person that is sick with COVID, was around 2 to 3. So if Dr. Klein got infected, I might infect 2 or 3 other people. Now with a Delta variant, that number is 5 or more. It's almost as infectious as chickenpox, one of the most infectious viruses that we know. And so for every person that's infected, maybe 5 or 6 people get infected. So we think that number for herd immunity might be as high as 80 or 90%. So it's one of the things that we kind of worry about. But real herd immunity is probably less important than really having it percolate and spread in the community so much that it continues to mutate. And so really what we need to do is tamp it down significantly so it's not spreading constantly. And that really speaks to one of the questions that I saw pop up about, why do kids need to be vaccinated if they're not going to be if they don't get as sick? And they certainly don't get as sick. But right now, we're seeing a lot more kids hospitalized than were hospitalized before. And I treated kids when I was in practice as well. I'm not a pediatrician. But we are seeing that. We're seeing kids who are getting this multi-system inflammatory syndrome, which is a problem. We're seeing kids that are getting long COVID as well. So, and that can happen regardless of how sick you get. So it's not just a cold or flu. This is really a multi-system virus, and we don't know how bad it can be. And I got my kids. Granted, I've got older kids, but if I had younger kids, I would get them vaccinated.
So I would add to the response by agreeing with Dr. Kalak and Dr. Klein, but saying it differently. There's actually an article that just came out a couple of days ago from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. And they are actually saying that, depends on how infectious the disease is. And now we're looking at variants, and, Delta is more infectious than the previous variants. So, we're looking at about 80, 90% for herd immunity. And so essentially when you're looking at, infection, certain things like the flu, it's probably less infectious than COVID. So therefore you need a lower percentage for herd immunity. So if it's so infectious, you can spread it easily to a lot of people. So that's why we're looking at a higher number for herd immunity. And regarding the younger population in San Diego County, if you haven't signed up for it, we do have it on our COVID-19 website. We have a weekly COVID watch, actually, a lot of information. We know, the group that's least vaccinated is a younger, the 20 to the 40s, because they think they're young and healthy. And that's true for the most part, but that's the group that is hospitalized a lot right now because of the low vaccination rate. So again, even though a lot of kids and a lot of young adults are young and healthy, we encourage them to get vaccinated as well, because we're looking at hospitalizations and deaths.
Can you all talk about the standard time between doses? Is there a standard time between vaccine doses?
Yeah, so I think since I'm unmuted, and I'll just go ahead and lead us on this. So for the Pfizer vaccine, the optimal time between the first and the second dose is 3 weeks, and then for the Moderna, it is 4 weeks. So that's the optimal time that has been studied. And the Johnson & Johnson, of course, is a 1-dose vaccine, so you don't need a second dose. I don't know if my fellow panelists have anything else to add or clarify.
The only thing I would add is for Pfizer, for those people who need a third dose or who are eligible for a booster, not the low immunity third dose. That's 6 months after you finish the first 2, and that's only for Pfizer.
I think it's just a good advertisement as well that I received my booster today. So many people are like, did you get your vaccine as well? And again, so I'm breaking my own hip. I'm releasing my information, but I, as a healthcare worker and as someone who sees a lot of not only children but also adults, and also have some predispositions to major illness, I got my booster today. So, and I received my second dose in January.
Thank you for sharing that.
We have a question. How can I convince someone, specifically a family member in a rural area, to get vaccinated, even though they're in a less populated area?
That's a good question. I'm going to go reverse order again. So, as I mentioned, I work in the East North County along the 76 corridor, and so some of my population areas are Julian, Santa Isabel, Palomar Mountain. I've gone out also to the North County Riverside area, so very rural areas, and so it's fairly unusual that people are by themselves in total isolation. And the example for that is that they have family members, they have people they interact with, they do use public roads, and they buy their groceries, in public areas as well, and so. For that reason, they're not alone, and the number of cases that we've seen has been steadily climbing over the past 6 to 8 months. I know that when the COVID or the vaccine initially had started, I was eagerly looking at the live maps that the county had been producing, and the hotspots were, of course, down in the inner cities where there was a lot closer interaction. But it definitely did spread out to the rural areas. This took a little time, but we had a recent outbreak along the 76 corridor, as everyone did when the Delta variant kind of came out. So no one is actually totally protected. And for that reason, to protect those around you, you want to get vaccinated.
And I would just add, in terms of accessibility, go to myturn.ca.gov and you can find the nearest vaccination clinic near you. There's always a pharmacy around the corner. There's always your physician that you can go to and get vaccinated. And there are some county and city run sites that are also accessible to you and is completely free. And then if there is mobile challenges and you can't leave your house, the county also has mobile teams that will actually go to you, vaccinate you and your family as well. So we want to make that as easy as possible to get vaccinated. And if anyone has any other question, let me know, and we certainly can connect you with resources. Some of the I think the health plans also provide transportation so that you can actually get to the vaccination site if necessary.
There's a question about the vaccine wearing off. And, I think that's something we're going to learn more about. I think this third dose booster that we're talking about now may not be something that's needed regularly. I know that the CEO of Pfizer is saying that we may need one yearly. We need to remember CEO of the company, and that may not actually be the case. When we look at what other vaccines are needed, a lot more don't need regular boosts than those that do. The reason our flu shot needs to be boosted every year is the way it mutates regularly, and coronavirus historically does not mutate the same way. Our tetanus, we need immunity boosters every 5 to 10 years. But most of them, we really don't need regular boosters. And so depending on what we see in terms of mutations here, once we get a really good primary immune response in our system, that may last for a long time. But this is a novel virus. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. So this first year or two will really tell us a lot.
We have another question, which I'm not sure the panelists can answer from one of our attendees, which is, why aren't there more strict laws for propagating false information about COVID or public health during the pandemic?
That's probably a legislative answer. So talk to your legislators about that.
That's a great question, and I don't want to have us not at least address it, because it affects our ability to practice every day. And I was just thinking about, because actually all of us actually on the panel here are pre-internet, and so we remember when the internet and the computer actually came into our lives. And so for many people, that's unfathomable to remember, to recall that. But because of that, information spread so quickly, and because of that, maybe people speaking on a street corner in Boston, you wouldn't hear about their conversation, but now you can hear about it instantaneously. So there comes a lot of responsibility with a social media, and it's something that it's a responsibility that's really been thrown on us, relatively quickly in over 2 decades. Now we can communicate across the world, and our ideas are spread across the world, and those ideas, they can trigger thoughts and comments, and it's just I think it's a maturational thing that we have to go through, much like kind of global warming, and go through that process and to mature as a race, to be responsible with our thoughts and feelings, because now they're instantaneously put across the world.
And I would also add my perspective. I was growing up with the internet, and back when the internet was new, we used this a saying that if it's on the internet, it must be true, right? I don't know if people remember that, but that was at one time, that was the case. And now we realize there's a lot of information out there, and we, individually, it is frustrating for a lot of people, but also we have to do a better job filtering what it is that we read and what it is. And so we have to make that determination. Do I trust that information? So once again, I'll just, circle back to, talk to your pharmacist, talk to your nurses, talk to your physician, talk to your trusted provider. They have spent a lot of time in school, and they also have to keep up with the current science, the current technology, current treatment. And so that's where you want to go and get your information. I mean, there's also the CDC. We have panels of experts that review and put together the information and some other sources, I'm sure, but, go back to your trusted source. I'm sure everyone heard, don't mistake Dr. Google for my doctorate degree. Just, you can find just about anything on the internet. So we all have to look at the information carefully.
Okay, we do have one other question, which comes from an attendee who recently lost his father to cancer and wondered, is our doctors, is the healthcare industry tracking the possible effects of the vaccine on existing illness? And they wondered, did the vaccine possibly exacerbate the illness?
So I'm going to just give two things. One, my deepest condolences, for the loss of your loved one, and the information that is out there in terms of documenting, what happens. Thankfully, in the United States, we have a great component of registries and systems in place to record information. That said, the ability for physicians to complete death certificates and in a process that is very uniform, there's a certain way we actually go through that process to complete death certificates. As I mentioned in the introduction, I do a lot of hospice work, and so I do a lot of unfortunately death certificates, and so there's a process in which you go through that. But in other countries, unfortunately there are 10, 20 millions of people that actually pass away without ever knowing that they were alive, that they existed, because of the poor informational structures that are in place. And so the information sharing that is important, that needs to be documented, is an important part of the society we live in. That said, in terms of your question, in my professional opinion, I don't believe that the vaccine was related to what happened to your father, and I agree with your oncologist. But again, it's the great thing with systems that we have them in place, and so we have what's called the BAERS system, BAERS, that the physician can actually provide information on potential side effects from vaccines, and we're required as physicians, professionals, to report that information because of the systems we have in place. And so for that, it's a good thing to kind of make sure that information reaches the appropriate source.
And I'll add to what Dr. Kalak just said. Also, the CDC has launched the VASA program with the COVID vaccine. So actually, when you receive the vaccine, there's actually a little QR code that they encourage you to scan on your mobile phone, and it takes you to the CDC website. You register, and you actually get texts every day from the CDC for a few weeks, and then they will check back with you periodically. There you go, he's getting one, or he's done it. So essentially, the patient themselves can also report their own experience and side effects as well, including the adverse effect, and also, you know, encourage everyone to talk to your provider. I know physician, pharmacists, and everyone who vaccinate actually has gone through training with the COVID vaccine. We have to go through the CDC training programs on how to report adverse events to the CDC directly. It is required if we suspect it at all. So typically everything that gets reported to the CDC, they have a panel that looks at information. They might reach out for additional information. And we have a lot of FAQs that I have seen on the CDC website. And I suspect they were there because, you know, of what we reported. So certainly encourage everyone, including the patients and family members, to report them as well, in addition to the healthcare providers.
And Dr. Doe, can you talk one more time about where people can go to get vaccines and
Yes.
get signed up?
Sure, absolutely. So, so I'm going to be biased and said, go to your pharmacy. They are always available. So pretty much walk into any pharmacy. You can make an appointment if you like, or walk in, you can get your vaccine. And pretty much every pharmacy now has a COVID vaccine along with the other vaccine. So I'll put a plug on there for flu vaccine as well. It is flu season upon us. So if you haven't already, go get a vaccine. You actually can get COVID vaccine and flu vaccine together, either in the same arms or on different arms. You don't have to wait for 2 weeks or any duration at all before you can get the flu vaccine. So also an opportunity for you to catch up on any missed vaccination because of COVID, because, you know, while COVID is happening, we have other diseases also. So don't forget about that. So pharmacy, of course, your healthcare providers, whoever you come when you have a medical problem, right? Go to your vaccine, go to your provider. We do have the county vaccination site also, and maybe the city might have some, but I would say, you know where to find your pharmacy, you know where to find your provider. And if you don't have one of those, go to myturn.ca.gov. Just go in there, put in your zip code, and it automatically takes you to the nearest location. It'll give you a couple different choices. You can actually make an appointment for flu vaccine also on MyTurn. So it's a one-stop shop for all kinds of vaccines, and encourage everyone to do so as soon as possible, because I'm watching the flu data, and, you know, some states have experienced a lot of flu cases, and there you go. Yeah, it's going up. So, you know, don't forget about flu. It's still here, and we get the flu vaccine every year. So now is the time.
And then Susan, I'm not sure if we had read this one aloud or not, but we had gotten one of those early questions from Marie asking if the city or the county plan on setting up a booster vaccination site specifically just for boosters. Do we know if there are any plans for that to happen?
So I'll just chime in real quick. The booster is actually the exact same vaccine for the Pfizer, at least for now. It's exactly the same vaccine. It's exactly the same dose that you got last time. So, you know, wherever you got your vaccine last time, you can go back there. Or if you went to one of those sites that are already closed, again, the 3 options that I shared earlier, your pharmacy, your physicians, and myturn.ca.gov.
And be on the lookout for probably in about a month or 6 weeks, being able to do that for younger kids as well.
I don't know, Dr. Klein, you were typing about the Novavax. Don't know if you want to say anything.
Yeah, I was going. So basically, Novavax looks to be highly effective from an efficacy standpoint. They're having some challenges with manufacturing, and so they have not been able to submit to the FDA yet.
Well, I just wanted to take an opportunity to thank Susan Moore for joining us from the San Diego County Library and for fielding all of the questions this evening. And then a huge thank you to our 3 panelists for carving out time in their busy schedules during a global pandemic to help answer questions for us. And then I also just want to ask the attendees, in your Zoom invite were 2 links, one in English and one in Spanish for a program evaluation. If you could please complete that evaluation, just let us know what you thought about this program. And if you have any advice for future medical information related programming, please include that in the program as well. And then I'll kick it over to our 3 panelists. If y'all have any final words you'd like to share with everyone.
Well, once again, you know, I wanted to thank everybody. And, you know, if you have any information or, question, please talk to your healthcare providers. That's your trusted source of information.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to echo my 2 co-panelists and put a plug in again for the county library system. Please utilize that whenever you can. It's it's an underutilized service, and that's great to get in and meet and talk to people as well at the library. So thank you again for the opportunity.
And I wanted to thank the library and my co-panelists. I may not have met all of you in person, but I know you guys. You were the men and women I took care of for years of my practice. I don't want to ever hear that anything happened bad to you guys. So please be careful. Life is precious. Life is special. Life is short. So let's do everything we can to preserve it. None of us is safe until we're all safe. Let's take care of each other. Thank you, Oscar.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Klein, Dr. Kalak. And I also would say, you know, I have been a lifelong library user. I was a city library user. I'm now also a county library user. And you wouldn't imagine the things you get for free from the library system. I got the latest audiobook on my phone. So a lot of books, audiobooks, ebooks, and, you know, everything that you can imagine. So, I encourage everyone to check the library out. I love reading and now listening.
I'm gonna have to pull that as a clip for our next marketing campaign. Thank you all so much, y'all. Everybody have a great night.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.